Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Hope your Ethereal is going pretty well so far. Got the blockchain vibe so far. I believe it's the future and all that. My name is Niran, Babalola. I work at ConsenSys, and I'm the founder of a product called Panvala. So this photo here is from Nigeria. And in Nigeria, it's relatively common for people to put up signs on their property to make sure that people know that this property is not for sale. Because scammers might come by and try to sell property that they don't actually own. So the people who put up these signs, they're not trying to do a favor for the scam victims, the potential scam victims. They're trying to do a favor for themselves. Because if somebody comes by and scams somebody and sells them property that's really mine, I might lose that property. When that dispute gets resolved, it might not be resolved in my favor. That's the way the property system is, not reliable enough. Well-defined property rights are a huge factor that separates prosperous, growing communities from those that stagnate. Why would you invest your savings or your labor to improve property when you might not be able to benefit from the work that you're putting in or the risk that you're taking? If you have to write "this property is not for sale" on your house, your community is probably missing some key institutions that are really necessary to grow and thrive in the long run. It should really be obvious that this property is for sale. You shouldn't have to put up a sign. When those institutions are in place, property rights are clear, and taking risks to improve your property starts to make a lot more sense. Property rights built the Ethereum ecosystem. The reason this whole thing got started is because people bought into the crowd sale in exchange for property. The buyers would get Ether on this new ledger that was being created. Since then, many teams have built on top of the Ethereum platform, and some of those teams sold yet more tokens to fund their work, just like Ethereum did. Other work on Ethereum was done by teams that already held Ether themselves and just wanted that Ether to be more useful. They wanted Ethereum to be useful, so the Ether that they held would be more useful. That increased utility is its own reward, and that's a new phenomenon that's driven the explosion of developer activity on the Ethereum network. But that incentive doesn't seem like it's really going to be enough to get us from here to where we're going. Over the past few years, we've seen several projects get started that claim to be the next Ethereum, the Ethereum killer. And every time a new one gets announced, crypto Twitter goes nuts. Everyone starts to say how Ethereum is untouchable, how the new team that's trying to get something off the ground doesn't know what they're talking about. It's our community's version of writing "this property is not for sale" on your house. If we have to say it so much, it's a sign that our community is missing some key institutions that we need to make it obvious that Ethereum is the only game in town. It can't just be an article of faith. It has to be something that's supported by institutions in our community. Money keeps flowing to the teams that are competing with Ethereum because it's really easy to reward people who contribute either work or funds to get something new off the ground. Just give them some tokens in the new thing that you're building and you're good to go. But it's really hard to be rewarded for improving a system that already exists. If you're trying to scale the existing Ethereum network, who's going to reward you for that? To avoid watching our system be torn apart by each new system that claims to be better than Ethereum, we really need a credible story that makes it clear how people who improve Ethereum over time will be rewarded. There's nothing wrong with launching new blockchain networks. It's a normal thing to do. As research in our community keeps advancing, we might need to launch new networks to make progress. The existing network might not be enough. But launching a new network doesn't mean you have to launch a new token. Ethereum 2.0 itself is a new network, but it runs on Ether from the existing network. That's the right model for advancing the state-of-the-art for scalable blockchains. And every team out there that's launching their own network could take the same approach. We'd have one clear token for a base layer blockchain and only have new tokens on top for dApps that don't compete directly with Ether. Rather than being seen as Ethereum competitors, they'd be seen as parallel efforts to advance Ethereum. The reason those teams that are competing with Ethereum don't do it because they're bad people who don't like us. They choose to compete because it's more rewarding. That's something that we have the power to change. Panvala's goal is to make cooperation more rewarding than competition. If you want to create a hub for independent blockchains to swap tokens, that's great. We should make sure that you can get rewarded for building it using Ether. If you want to create a sharded blockchain where each shard can have its own different protocol instead of Ethereum's, that sounds good too. We should make sure that you can get rewarded for building it using Ether. That's what we've designed Panvala to do. Panvala is a donor-driven platform that helps fund the work that the whole Ethereum ecosystem depends on. We've designed Panvala to give the whole community a shared incentive to raise funds to support these rewards. Panvala runs on its own token, but it's not its own blockchain. It's designed to support the community we already have, not to create a new one and compete. So far, Panvala has issued 2 rounds of token grants. Ethereum 2.0 client teams like Prismatic Labs and Sigma Prime were awarded 800,000 tokens for the work that they've been doing. Status was awarded 200,000 tokens for work to help teams monitor the security of smart contracts that are already live on the mainnet. State channel teams like Connext, who we heard from earlier today, Prototypal, and L4, who are working on the counterfactual framework, they've been awarded 850,000 tokens to scale the network on layer 2. Panvala patrons donate to Panvala by buying tokens from grant recipients like the ones I listed and donating them back to the smart contract where those tokens came from. That's how the system can keep issuing grants over time. Instead of giving money to a nonprofit organization to distribute, Panvala never touches dollars, never touches Ether. It runs on its own currency instead. Just like land ownership gives people an incentive to build buildings, and holding Ether gives people an incentive to build more useful apps on Ethereum, Panvala tokens give people an incentive to raise funds and distribute them well so they can attract even more donors who are using that token. Instead of running like a normal nonprofit where only the staff gets rewarded for increasing donations, in Panvala, anyone in our community can benefit from recruiting more donors. So how do you govern a system like this? There's a whole bunch of decentralized governance models that people have proposed, and we've designed one that we think works particularly well for the use case that we have. We call it slate governance. What sets it apart is that it's based on a slate of proposals where only one can issue, where only one slate can be executed each quarter. You can have as many proposals as you want on a slate, and you can have as many slates as you want competing with each other, but only one of those is going to win, and that slate's proposals are the ones that are going to execute that quarter. The next quarter will have its own batch of slate, and so on. Secondly, if there's only one slate proposed in a quarter, there's no vote of token holders at all. The whole point of the system is to get the consensus of the community recorded on chain. And if nobody competed with the slate that somebody recommended, that slate that's there is the consensus of the community. So it just gets executed without a vote of token holders. Thirdly, it's really important the identity of the group that recommended a slate. Not just about which proposals are being executed, we care who recommended them. And finally, whenever you're recommending a slate of proposals, you have to put your money where your mouth is. If you're saying that this slate of proposals is the consensus of the community, you need to stake tokens on that you're going to lose if your slate loses. If your slate wins, you get your tokens back. But if your slate loses, those tokens are going to be donated to the system. So there's a couple of outcomes that we desire from this model. First of all, we want to make sure that the governance is done off-chain before a vote ever happens. We don't believe that governance is really effective when you're sending a transaction for every decision that needs to be made. Rather, we should govern our systems off-chain using whatever mechanism we want. You can use a one person, one vote. You can have a monarchy. However you want to govern yourselves, do it off-chain, and then record that consensus to the blockchain. That's the outcome that we want. We only want there to be votes on chain when there's either a dispute about what the consensus of the community actually is, or if somebody just really wanted their voice to be heard so much that they were willing to lose their tokens. So they put something down that wasn't the consensus, they stake tokens on it, and they lose in the vote. That's fine, But most of the time, we want to avoid having to vote at all. We want people to do that hard work off-chain and record the consensus on-chain. So we've already been running a system like this. For Panvala, we've already been issuing grants using this pattern. So we appointed a group that we call the Panvala Awards Committee. And we started accepting applications at the beginning of this year. We issued the first batch of grants in February, and the second batch of grants earlier this month. There's a third batch of grants going out in August. And what the Panvala Awards Committee does is they have to decide when there are too many requests for tokens, only so many tokens available, which of these grant applications should get on their slate. The tokens available follow a decaying curve that's just like the Bitcoin block reward. So we start off with a lot of tokens available, and then over time there's fewer and fewer tokens. So if teams request more tokens than are currently being released, some of those applications aren't going to make it, and they're not going to get tokens. That's what the awards committee decides. They recommend a slate of the best applications that they can put together using the tokens that are available, and those are the ones that get the tokens. When the system's live on mainnet in August, you don't have to be the Panvala Awards Committee to make a recommendation of a slate of proposals. Anybody can do it. You have to put your money where your mouth is. You have to stake tokens on your slate. You can be the Panvala Awards Committee. That's what you want. So we have a third batch of grants that are going out later in August. The application deadline for that third batch is June 7th. So if you're a team or a team that you know is doing work that benefits the whole Ethereum ecosystem but doesn't really have a business model of its own, we want you to apply for the third batch of grants. Property rights for land gave us our cities. They gave us the building that we're in right now. Property rights for ideas gave us the Industrial Revolution and the continued technological progress that put supercomputers in our pockets. With Panvala, we now have property rights for cooperation. The people who grow the strongest communities, who do the most work together, can now be rewarded for it. That's how Ethereum will thrive in a multi-chain future. We won't have to say this property is not for sale anymore. We won't have to reassure people that new competing projects don't have a chance to unseat Ethereum. It'll be obvious instead. We got where we are today by improving the network that we're all loyal to. But being loyal to a technology doesn't make any sense. Technology can let you down. I'd rather be loyal to something that'll never let me down. I'd rather be loyal to this community. Ethereum isn't destined for success because it has the best code. It's destined for success because it has the best people. It's because of people like you. I've met so many of you and talked to you about why you're here. Some of you got involved for the obvious reason, the price went up, but you found other reasons to stay. Some of you watched an economy that once lifted up a broad middle class turn into an economy that funnels wealth to the top. And you see a way to fix it in this technology, somehow, some way. Some of you are tired of having our online lives steered and directed by giant corporations that share our data but don't share our interests. And you want to use Ethereum to give people control of the networks that they use. New blockchains that launch with their own tokens might attract speculators who are just looking for the next pump and dump. But there's so many of us who are here for something else, and we're here to stay. We've seen how blockchain technology can coordinate miners to cooperate to maintain a ledger. Now it's time to use this technology to coordinate this community to cooperate, rather than sitting back and watching us splinter into new factions as each new blockchain launches. You can get started today at panvala.com. Become a Panvala patron. Let's sustain Ethereum together, then find out what else we're capable of. Thank you.